My guest today here in the studio, actually it's a conference room with a very snowy New York City outside, are some guys who you all know and have been following for a long time, and I'm so excited to have them both in here together. Michael Voltaggio and Bryan Voltaggio, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so Bryan, you and I have a little bit of history with interviews.
Yeah, I know nobody can see right now who's listening, but maybe they're going to see it, but I have a tattoo that we got together, which I don't know if you've seen in a long time, right?
No, I remember it quite vividly. That is
there it is right there.
gorgeous.
But now it's been surrounded now because I have more children.
Yes, so
And the last time we were together.
Thanks for the call, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah.
well, if you want to describe exactly.
Yeah.
Moment together.
So I got a tattoo.
You're the one flying out, man.
So it was Hand of Glory, right?
Yes.
Where I got it, and I can't remember who the artist's name was. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to remember if that was
But that's-
Sideshow Jen.
Yeah, that's where we got it. So it's a pig because my son was born in the year of the pig, and his name is Thatcher. And since then, I had more children. So I have Piper on this arm because I continued with the theme, and I have a snake here forever who was born in the year of the snake.
Oh.
So.
And you have it there forever.
Yeah, and forever. Yes,
And
it'll be there.
forever and
Yes,
ever.
for sure.
I got a marrow scoop up my ossobuco
That's right.
bone that day, and then my former colleague Sarah LaTrent got a strawberry on her stomach. I think that's her sort of first and only. And then you've got a whole gorgeous wealth of.
Yeah, we don't have enough time for me to tell my stories on all that.
But is there one in particular you want to mention?
There's a food-related one, for sure. There's a grilled cheese sandwich with sunglasses on the back of my arm. And I arrived in Portland for a feast one year, and Tillamook had put a phone in my room that said, "This is a telephone. Anywhere you are in the city, we'll bring you grilled cheese sandwiches at any time of the night." I said, if this is true, I will get a tattoo of a grilled cheese on the back of my arm. So I proceeded to, now this is going to sound weird, so I'll preface this by saying like it's culturally and socially acceptable. In Portland, everyone goes out to, what do you call them? Bars with dancers. Men and women go out together. It's
and
like,
there are vegan ones?
That's the bar culture there, right? Mm-hmm. So we were bringing grilled cheese sandwiches to everyone in the bars, and so all night long, everywhere we were giving grilled cheese sandwiches out, and sure enough, they lived up to it, and I got one tattooed on the back of my arm.
That is lovely. And what's not to love about somebody who brings you a grilled cheese?
Showing up to a bar crowded full of drunk people with bags of grilled cheese sandwiches, we made so many friends that night. It was ridiculous.
And I know in Portland, too, other things are legal that are not in other parts of the country, too. So imagine there might have been people especially glad to see you.
True that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but y'all make people happy with food on the regular. You're doing it together. So I want to talk about growing up together and you both deciding to be chefs. The word that I kept running across when you were talking about your childhood was ran amok, which is a sort of weird thing, but I saw it in several different things. The impression that I had gotten, I got to know you two on Top Chef. I saw both of you on there, and you both spoke so lovingly of your mother and how, as a single mother, she kept you both, fed and cared for and all that. But did you start cooking for yourselves at some point during that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a transition period. Every kid has their story. Ours is probably a little bit more extreme than most, and I'm not going to go too deep into the details of that, but there were certainly opportunities for us to be creative at home with ingredients that were in the cabinet, i.e., bags of ramen or some bologna and some cheese. And I think one distinct food memory that I have was at, I don't know, age 11 or 12, deciding again how to put together the perfect bologna and cheese sandwich, and it was about toasting the bread and then putting the mustard on the bologna side, because in my mind at that age I thought, well, mustard goes better with the bologna part, and then putting the mayonnaise on the cheese side because the cheese and the mayonnaise went better together. And then when you put the sandwich together and you bit it, texture of the toast with the meat being on the right side with the mustard and the cheese being on the right side with the mayonnaise, that was something at a very young age. I know that today that's just a bologna and cheese sandwich, but to me I'm like, try this. And when my friends came over, they were always just like, why is this so good? And it was about the architecture of the sandwich. Then you evolve to how to take top ramen and mix other things into it, make it, leave pour the water out, and then put the flavoring package into the noodles and mix all that together, throw a pat of butter in there, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I wonder if I can crack an egg in there. And all of a sudden you've got this dish that, again, at the age of 11 or 12, 13 years old, I don't know that a lot of kids have thoughts like that, and so that's what was happening to me anyway.
Yeah, and how about for you, Bryan?
Well, at that age, when he was 13, I was 15. So that means I was already cooking. So I was already
Yes.
in a
You got a really
kitchen.
early start.
Yeah, so it was only, and we're only 2 years apart, and I started working at a local hotel because I wanted to have money.
It was a
So
Holiday Inn. He's trying to make it sound
Yeah.
glamorous.
No,
Our dad was a
well,
security
yeah,
guard
right.
at the hotel and got Bryan a job at the Holiday Inn.
Yeah,
Hey,
so I
cooking's
started
cooking.
But I started as a busboy at first, and I was running room service and clearing tables. And at 14 years old, you're like, oh, gross! I'm like clearing somebody's plates. Like I'd rather do something more fun. And I saw knives, fire, cussing, clanging pans, like the whole 9 yards in the kitchen. Like it was different back then because the kitchen was closed, but it was fun, and it looked like it was a lot more fun than what I was doing. So I asked the chef, I was like, look, if I take this culinary program in school, will you let me cook in the kitchen? And he gave me a shot. So that's where I kind of started cooking
And
there.
then I got a job there too, and Bryan was my boss.
Yeah.
So was that the first
Well, not
time
at
you
first,
two
but
worked together?
It was.
I was busboy. I followed the same footsteps as Bryan, and then one day, it was a Saturday, they were like, why don't you come in and work in the kitchen for Sunday brunch? Little did I know that him and the other sous chef that made that decision were both off the next
Yeah.
day, and the executive chef was the one there, and they didn't tell him about that. So I showed up dressed in a chef uniform the next day, and the guy looks at me and goes, what the fuck is this, Halloween? Because I'm wearing a chef, in his mind, costume at the time because I wasn't supposed to be dressed like a chef. They then proceeded to go with that theme, and I remember I think it was a Thanksgiving brunch. My job was to run the food back and forth to the buffet line with the prisoners that were on the work release program from the jail that was local, and so they decided to dress us up as a pilgrim and an Indian, and I had to wear a costume running food back and forth on the buffet. They thought that shit was funny too. So things have changed since. We then immediately after that got in a little fist fight one day at home because one day at work he started yelling at me, and the food and beverage director drags me in the office and is like, I don't care what it is at home, but at work Bryan's the boss and what he says goes. And so what I did when Bryan came home one day, he walked through the front door, I'm like, I don't care what happens at work, but at home. And then he kicks my ass. So I learned not to mess with Bryan in that way anymore. So
Yeah.
It's not that bad. Come on.
So yes, who's the bully? It's Bryan.
I'm not a bully.
Yeah. By the way, Top Chef, there's a lot of editing, so Bryan was.
No.
No.
I clearly remember a plastic wrap issue, but whatever.
Well, let's talk for a second, though, about sort of finding that right place in the kitchen when maybe, there's not as much structure in other parts of your life. I talk to a lot of chefs about mental health, about physical health, about all this kind of stuff. And the refrain that I hear over and over is that for people who maybe it's fine if people are not, in a desk job suited for that. If they have different kind of hours, if they have different kind of feelings, if they have different kinds of drives and impulses and wants and all that, and it's not judged in the same way in the kitchen, and there seems to be a rhythm and a home there. Tell me about what.
Yeah, I would say our early experience working in a kitchen, at least for me, for sure. I mean, I was in this culinary program in school, so I was out by like 11 or 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, and so I would go to work, do my homework, at work, and then start cooking at 2 o'clock. And I'd work from 2 to 10. And so I think it provided a lot of structure, for me growing up, having there be structure in my life and working almost a full-time job while going to high school kept me from that earlier turn running amok and
Yeah, I saw that in
trouble.
I saw that in like two different things, and I was like, that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I mean, maybe like that structure and that family sort of environment that was created in the kitchen, just helped shape me as what I would wanted to do as a career. And I think I kind of fell in love with it and got it. Not necessarily trapped. I fell in love with working in the kitchen because of it.
I think there's another side of that story too, though, because a lot of times I think a lot of chefs use, the kitchen saved me and stuff like that, and I definitely believe that there's some truth to that. But a lot of times too, is I think a lot of the, sort of substance abuse and things that have come with our industry, with the territory, happened because we were working in the kitchen too. So I think in a lot of cases it definitely saved a lot of people, provided us with a lot of structure, but it also introduced us to a lot of stuff that, maybe going in a more traditional path, or trajectory wouldn't have led us to certain things that we ended up getting involved in too. So, I mean, I was definitely a punk kid, and I definitely got in my fair share of trouble, but I didn't stop getting in trouble because I worked in the kitchen. I think I got more, actually.
Yeah, I always say it's a chicken and egg sort of thing because it exacerbates some and rewards some not super healthy behavior. There was an essay that this wonderful chef Greg Baker wrote for Communal Table on Food and Wine called "The Empty Hour," and he talked about that time between service and when you're trying to wind down, and all those sort of reasonable people in your life are who would tell you like just come home and go to bed or you don't.
Well,
do
there's that,
thing.
but there's also the fact that like when you're working in a restaurant and you're 15, 16, 17 years old, you didn't need a fake ID to go out and drink or anything like that anymore. It was there. Like it was like, somebody poured in a paper cup and handed it to you and during service at that young age before you find the serious part. And I think that's where the career sort of saves you when you make the transition from just working in the food service industry to working at the highest level of the food service industry. And I think that's where the professionalism, that's where the lifestyle change happens, and that's where you become a better person. I remember when I started working at the Greenbrier, I'm like, what is this? And then I left there and went to like work at the Ritz-Carlton, and I'm like, wait a second, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and I have to shave and like all this sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden you're molded as a human and not just as an employee. And then obviously we worked for Charlie Palmer, Jose Andres, and the list of chefs that we were fortunate enough to work with, and that's when your career started saving you, I
and
guess.
That transition happened for us at the same exact time. Literally the day that, because Michael and I were living together in Frederick in a house, and it was, we had a bunch of friends living with us. At that time, at some point, there's a fire lit under us that we're going to make a career out of this. I enrolled and went to the Culinary Institute of America, and Michael went down and took a really intense apprenticeship program at the Greenbrier. So that structure then continued to get better. We started putting us on this professional path of being a cook and a chef. And it changed it from being just us being punk kids in a kitchen, kind of learning how to cook, but not really sure what we're going to do with it. That then gave us a pathway to where we were going to build something out of it.
We didn't start in the glamour, like we didn't start in the glamour on the
I
glamour
didn't
side
go
of
to
the
school
industry.
until I was
Like
20
we were
years
cooking
old.
because we needed to make money to survive and live, and so we did whatever we had to do to pay rent. I moved out of my house when I was 16 years old. Brian got a job in Pennsylvania. I took over Brian's apartment while I was still in high school playing football and working full time. Like I had to make money to live, to buy food, to buy clothes, to pay his rent because he was under a lease, and so I wanted, and so. Yeah, these are we did it to survive back then, and then realized that we were already what we were going to be when we grow up at a very young age.
How did you make it through? Because there are a lot of people who take that path and they burn out, they die, they crash out, something. What happened for you two where this has been a sustainable thing?
For me, I had children when I was 20. I got pregnant at 20, child at 21. So, I have a daughter who's now in her second year of college. I didn't have a choice. It was either when you're responsible for another life, then I think your perspective changes and you start to realize that there's more than just you that you have to worry about. And so I was making $11 an hour at the Greenbrier in West Virginia when I became a father. I needed to figure out how to get through that. When you don't have a choice, it's a lot easier, actually. I know it sounds like it should be harder, but when you don't have a choice, you just have to put your head down and do it.
And how about for you?
I think for me is I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart who, our first date was the prom, and, we moved to New York together, and she was the one who pushed me to go to school. There's a lot of influence on me. Even Michael was like, yeah, go, you got the opportunity. Everybody was kind of behind it, but, I think she was the one who kind of kept me grounded. She wasn't, she was outside of the business.
Yeah,
she was in
people
design.
know that you were delivering pizzas and driving to the city on the weekends to stage in New York because he couldn't afford to be at Culinary Institute of America.
That is
I almost didn't finish. Yeah, I almost didn't finish school. I didn't have enough money to finish my last term, and I literally got a bill and it was $7,500. I was like, I got $100 in my bank account. Like I can't pay, and so somehow I got a grant. It was like one of those angel grants that happened with school. Culinary, I guess, somehow takes care of people who really want to do something with it. And, I was already working in the city. I was working for Charlie Palmer at the time at Oriole. And I was like, and I already was offered a job upon graduation. And I was like, screw it. I'll just quit school and go down there and work. I've already done what I needed to do, but I ended up finishing. And so it was great. And so those little kind of rewards, I think meant something a lot to me too. And maybe helped keep me on the right path, I'm glad you brought that up because, I kind of sometimes forget about that, that.
That you were delivering pizza.
And I worked at Domino's. That was where I actually, it was the first job I ever walked out on. I've never quit anything in my life.
So what was the event that made you
I will
walk
tell
out
you,
of-
so
You
this
didn't get the pizza there in 30 minutes.
No, I was the fastest delivery driver ever. I got a lot of tickets too, but my point is, and I had a lot of regular customers because they knew I'd be there quick. And so there's this one exit out of the shopping center. It was like, don't turn right on something or left or whatever. And it was like my last day because I was about ready to go into graduation week. And I made the wrong turn. I got pulled over. And so I didn't even deliver the pizza. I drove back in. So sorry if you're listening. I didn't deliver your pizza, but I drove back into the shopping center, went back in the Domino's, and took the hat off. It was like and threw it down. It was like the Domino's hat, and just threw it down. It was like,
You wore the hat?
yeah, I wore
You
the
have any
hat.
photos of you in that?
Hey, you know what? I followed all the rules. I was like, I'm gonna pay more for this ticket that I just got than I'm gonna make today. I quit. And I left. And it was the only time I've ever done it in my life. So I'm sorry, for that person who was running that shop, but yeah.
Was this up in Hyde Park where
It was
you were
in Hyde
delivering?
Park.
Okay, yeah.
We won't get too specific because I don't want to get down to the location. Yes, it was in Hyde Park area. But I specifically worked south of Hyde Park, so I didn't deliver the culinary.
Oh,
Yeah.
and was that deliberate because you didn't want to see people?
Well, I
Is
mean,
that
so
a
what? It's
thing?
pizza. I mean,
Yeah,
it wasn't that big
no,
of a
true.
deal. But yes, I had a lot of friends, and I want them to
Right.
mess with me, order pizza and not pay.
Yeah,
You know
that
what I
makes
mean?
sense.
That kind of stuff.
I was in New Paltz around that time
Yeah, you were,
too.
yeah.
So yeah, I was sort of familiar with the area. Can we go back to Ariel for a second because for a long stretch of time, especially in the mid to late '90s, that was my favorite restaurant in the world. And when were you there?
I was there between '96 and 2003.
I definitely ate your food. I remember writing a review.
Wouldn't have been mine. It would
Well,
have been
somebody.
Jerry's.
Charlie's and Jerry
True,
Hayden's.
but
and-
you might
yeah.
have,
Yes, I had a hand in it for sure. I helped cook.
One of the first restaurant reviews I ever wrote
Really?
was for City Search, and it was a love letter to Ariel.
That's
I
awesome.
was so obsessed. And at the time, I had, I don't know if I've grown out of it or not, but I had a scallop allergy, so I could never have.
The scallop
potato shell.
sandwich.
Yeah, so I could never have that. But I loved the townhouse because I felt like if you walked in there, everybody looked beautiful in that light.
Yeah.
It was one of the first places that made me feel like a grown up. And I've heard about that kitchen because I know Chef Brian Caswell had told me about being in there, and he's a super tall dude, and neither of you are short at all, and having to sort of negotiate that physical space.
It was a tough kitchen to work in, but a really rewarding one. I mean, that's where I learned to cook, at that level. And, working for Charlie was fantastic there. I mean, it was an iconic restaurant and, still is to me.
Charlie became family to Bryan and
Yeah.
to, for that matter, both of us. I was having some trouble at a different job, and I called Bryan, and Charlie, offered me a job in California and relocated me out there and gave me a fresh start and stuff like that. So it was Charlie's definitely family. He's a good guy, but he is also. He taught us some work ethic for sure.
I mean, I love those restaurants. The Oriole in Las Vegas is the grandest, strangest place with Psalms on bungees, and it's a very precise
Well, he was
technical-
one of the first chefs that really pioneered into Vegas.
And it's still there.
And did one of those sort of management style deals, which I think, Bryan and I are doing one now with Conrad. It's coming back full circle. I think that those type of deals are going to sort of save this restaurant crisis that I think we're facing due to the economics of running and operating a restaurant today. I mean, the cost of goods, the cost of labor, the cost of occupancy, everything's gone through the roof, and the formula just doesn't make sense anymore because the cost of food on menus, the cost of menus isn't going up. And so Charlie sort of
so
pioneered
menu-
that back in the day, and that Vegas model, I think, is going to be one that's going to keep a lot of great restaurants around.
So that
I-
menu you reviewed back in the 1990s, that price point really hasn't changed.
Yeah, I mean,
Not dramatically, for sure.
no, you're absolutely. I will go back. I will send you the review
Yeah,
that
no,
I sent.
I-
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a huge, increase in what the diner threshold is for, a great meal, and we understand that. I mean, we want there still to continue to create value, but the bottom line is shrinking. It's not getting any bigger, so we have to be smart about what we do now in
Yeah,
business.
so let's talk about a few of those decisions then. I absolutely agree with you that having, being kind of the cornerstone of something that's like a real estate development or a hotel or something like that is deeply helpful and the way to go forward. So can you talk about, the restaurant you're opening now?
Yeah, I mean, the project we're working on now, it's Bryan and I's third restaurant together, our second full service, meaning we've got our steakhouse with the MGM, and then we've got Starfish out in LA, which is a fast casual sandwich shop with fish sandwiches. But the project we're working on now, we partnered with Conrad, which is an extension, the luxury brand for Hilton. Bryan and I are doing a restaurant together called Estuary, which, I mean, Bryan can describe the name, the nature of the name better than I can.
Estuary meaning, it's, the Chesapeake Bay is one of the biggest in the world. And so there's a lot of supporting, agriculture. The Bay has been, there's this huge resurgence of the availability of, really delicious fish and shellfish that's coming from the Bay, because a lot of work that a lot of, farmers and fishermen have done to make that happen. And so there's a time now I'm seeing that we're starting to help develop and define Mid-Atlantic cuisine, and so Estuary is going to be a part of that. And we want to bring this experience to the district, and it's our first restaurant that's going to be in Center City together.
That's so exciting. And let's talk about the sort of the mission of it too, because sustainability, I think there are so many people who have heard the words about, seafood sustainability and all that kind of stuff, and it becomes a wash. Can you talk about what it actually means to you and how you are implementing it at the restaurant?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's being first just responsible and paying attention to, and it doesn't require, I mean, we're not the ones who are making those decisions for sure. There's a lot of really smart people out there in this world that are helping guide us to make those right choices in how we procure ingredients and who we look to for sources but there's also people, like the Rappahannock guys and True Chesapeake Oyster who are, introducing and, really helping start to clean up the bay and the waterways by bringing shellfish back that, had long been, ripped out of there, and also pollution created issues. But now the water's getting cleaner, and the opportunities are getting better for us to really look to them for sources. But then also just, being respectful of, and using people like, Monterey Bay, who, has this, for those who don't know, they have a really great guideline for sustainability in fish and knowing which ones are the right buys. And so if as a chef, you can use it as a resource to go out there and buy fish. But also having those relationships, as direct relationships as a chef, is really important. So at what time of the year to buy, the right fish.
Yeah. Can you talk about, I love the word estuary,
Yeah.
and if you would explain what that physical body is, an estuary.
Basically, it's like where the bay and the stream sort of meet. So, and then the ecosystem around that. So, for instance, crabs, and it's not just what's in the water, but it's like what's growing on the land around it and so forth. So it's the entire ecosystem surrounded by the bay, basically, is how we're looking at it. And then the Chesapeake Bay watershed being one of the largest estuaries in the country, if not
in the world.
In the world.
Yeah.
Bryan and I thought it was kind of brilliant to focus on that. We're not putting ourselves in that box, though, meaning we're definitely going to go outside of that area if and when we have to, because it is very difficult to remain hyper-local, but we're definitely going to have hyper-focus on that. And then, obviously, Bryan has a lot more experience living in that area than I do, because I left 10 years ago. And so for me, my reunion was coming back and doing the steakhouse that we have together, but this is an opportunity for me to come back and really cook regionally in my home region. And so I'm like super excited about that, for sure.
There's no lack of opportunity. I mean, there's, from northern Pennsylvania, southern Jersey, all the way down to North Carolina. I mean, that really is the defining area, and all the way as far west as West Virginia. I mean, we're buying lamb from Shenandoah Valley as far south as Border Springs, like Craig
Border
Rogers.
Springs.
And so that'll be included. And going as far north as some really great organic farmers in like Lancaster area in Pennsylvania. And so there's these huge co-ops that bring produce all the way down to the district. And there's some travel time there and all of that stuff, but and there's plenty of farms like right around the district. I mean, don't get me wrong, that would be looking to, but there's just an abundance of produce and opportunity there, and there's a long growing season that people don't really realize. I mean, it's almost 9 months out of the year, and there's overwintering of products too. With hoop houses and greenhouses. I mean, the whole agricultural sort of model has changed, and there's a lot of farmers who are adapting it. Gone are the days where it's just cash crops that are being grown around our region. For example, there's a lot of produce farms, a lot of market farms that are popping up. I mean, our farmers markets are amazing, just like they are here in New York. And
the other side of it is, that we're getting an opportunity to open a restaurant in a very competitive food city. And so I think for a quote reunion, for me to come back and to get to work with Bryan on a project like this, we're not just doing it, no offense, in Frederick, Maryland, which Bryan has established himself and done a great job up there, but this is in a very competitive city as it relates to restaurants and hospitality. And so we want to be in that competition. We want to be a part of this thriving food scene that's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. I got to be a part of L.A., I think, really at the beginning of all that, and now sort of a decade later, I think what's happening in Washington, D.C. is not unlike what happened or has been happening in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Portland. D.C. is becoming a serious food city.
It is. I know. I used to date a guy who lived in D.C. and we would go down there and sort of there was a lot of steakhouse there
Yes.
at the time, and it was really, really great. And we actually really fantastic Chinese food and Ethiopian food that we would get all the time. But otherwise, I wasn't sure sort of what the cuisine was. And when I lived in Maryland during college, I was a broke college student, so didn't really get to have the food of the place. So I can't wait to go back to the region and taste the place. So let's talk about family, because you both have said about how having kids really grounded you, and how you became a part of Charlie. How Charlie is family. Family means so many different things in restaurants. You two are flesh and blood family. We talk about that particular dynamic and how you brought it to work, and how that has influenced then how you work with other people.
Certainly, for us, it means that there's honestly, there's no bullshit involved. Especially when it comes to us, creating an experience for our guests. And I think that we also can help, complete thoughts, and there's that whole thing. Early on in our careers, we also were very competitive growing up as siblings. So there was a time and a place where we sort of went off on our own paths. This helped, prove ourselves to who we're going to be as individuals. But now, as we've matured and we've grown together in this business, we're starting to, come together more. And now you're starting to see that as Michael and I are starting to, it first started, I think the first thing we ever did together, of course, is we wrote a book together. And then, from that came now new restaurant opportunities. And now we're working together and collaborating on that. But those career choices and those pathways we took beforehand, we gained a lot of different experience. And now bringing that together is just, has enabled us to combine now 50 years worth of cooking experience, as we're moving forward now in this time.
Put it that way, wow.
Yes, because 25 and 25, and essentially, and so now, putting that dynamic together enables us to do more with what we've experienced in our past, and we can trust each other to do that together because we are siblings, we are family, and it enables us to do things more efficiently and faster too.
So how do you bring other
Not that we're trying to do things quick, but you understand what I mean.
No, there's shorthand with siblings. I sort of refer to my sister as the other witness, because there's only one person in the world who can sort of verify, like, yes, this is how this thing was when we were growing up, or there's only just that one person who has that same set of experiences as you do. How do you include other people on your team in that? How do you not alienate people when they might see you as one person?
Well, at this time and place where we are right now, we've had a lot of people who have come through both of our kitchens individually. Like, for example, our chef de cuisine of our new restaurant is going to be opening in D.C. Worked with Michael first at Inc. in L.A. for 3 to 4 years, and then came with me. He had a position in between that, and then came down from upstate New York or Philly and worked with me at Volt for almost 3.5 years. And now he's going to be down in DC opening the new space. So that's
We've
happened.
shared a lot of people where they worked with me in LA, and then they came to DC or Maryland rather, for that matter, and worked with Bryan. The steakhouse, when it opened, we had probably 6 employees there in that restaurant that had worked for an extended amount of time in Los Angeles with me, and some of them stayed on, some of them had left there to go work at Volt at Bryan's restaurant. And so where Bryan needed staff, if he called me and was like, I need a sous chef right now, instead of me like being selfish and hanging on to my entire team, if I had somebody that was ready to step up and go, and I didn't have a position for them, it was very easy for me to go over there and say, hey, listen, my brother's looking for a sous chef. Do you want to go move to Maryland, to the East Coast? And so for us, I think we had this philosophy of trying to keep them in the family somehow. And so there was an appreciation, I think, for that. And with that came a loyalty. And I think that word loyalty is one that is really getting lost in our industry, because, I mean, really it's getting lost in a lot of industry, to be honest. And that loyalty for me is so important, that, you know, we have people that want to come back to us even after they've left. And I think there's that philosophy of, like, you know, 8s hire 7s and 6s and 9s hire 10s. I don't know where I really fall into that, but I definitely want to be surrounded by people that are going to make me better and help me continue to grow. Otherwise, like, why am I doing this? You know, it's like we can't just rely on each other, but relying on each other has enabled us, I think, to rely on other people, therefore be able to grow in a way that's healthy, as opposed to, you know, sort of the lessons we've learned over the past 10 years.
I think it's it's a sign of maturity to be able to trust people that they're going to do a really good job. And you've both mentioned Charlie. Who are some of the other people who have seen you along the way and spotted you out and wanted to help you or corrected you when you were wrong? Who's lifted you up along the way?
There's a chef by the name of Peter Timmins. He's since passed away. He was the executive chef of the Greenbrier. When I was there, he's a certified master chef, was actually slated to be one of the coaches for Bocuse d'Or a few years ago, and before that was fatally died, gunshot wounds. Still, I'm not going to say what happened really, but he said something to me one day when I left. When I was leaving the Greenbrier, he said, one day you're going to wake up and realize you're not the student anymore, you're the teacher. Are you going to be ready for that? And those words, like, I don't want to say haunt because he's no longer here, but those words have stayed with me since he said that to me. And he was one of the most brilliant minds, selfless educators, wasn't in it for the fame or any of that sort of stuff, but the guy, like, he could recite the first 128 pages of Escoffier like he was reading it off the back of his hand. And so it was like people like that, that were in it because they genuinely were just passionate about their craft. And I think I think a lot of chefs have chefs like that were never in the spotlight, that really molded their career, because everyone wants to talk about the guys that are like on TV or on the cover of a magazine or have 12 restaurants or whatever. We've all been touched by, I don't care which chef you're talking about, everyone's worked for somebody like that made a difference, down to the guy at the Holiday Inn that Bryan and I worked for that taught us work ethic. I mean,
What's his name?
Mike Alapredi.
And Mike told me one thing that I'll never forget. He said, look, you know, and this was right before he actually left, because he ended up leaving before I did. And he said, look, you're going to go out there and you're going to work for all of these different chefs, and then one day you're going to put your voice together. And I always, on one plate, and then it's going to be Bryan Voltaggio. And I never thought of that until later in my career. And I remembered that moment because it's very true. I mean, any experience that you have in the food world, and, you know, whether it be through travel or visiting other places, you know, cooking together, you know, you're going to draw on those experiences and learn from that, and then build that into your repertoire, and that's going to help shape you, who you are as a cook and a chef. You know, you're going to look back for all those experiences and those influences, and that's going to see you whether you know it or not. You know, it's going to come through on a plate, and that's something that always stuck with me too as well.
So is that something you consciously do then, the mentorship part of, I mean, people can learn to cook. There are a million brilliant cooks out there who can't lead a kitchen necessarily, and it might not be their fault. They were not taught well. Mm-hmm. How did you learn how to lead? Is it by watching those?
I think you have to realize that you can't do it by yourself. And when you get yourself in a situation enough times where you don't have enough help, you need to figure out how to correct that. And it's not always like, people will use the excuse like, good luck finding help in that city. Sometimes you need to look at your leadership skills and wonder why you don't have enough good people around you, and you need to figure out how to keep people. And it's not like back in the day when we were cooking in the beginning, it was like we needed to go work for people to get recipes and get information. Now the information is at their fingertips. So now you actually have to be grateful to have people working for you, as opposed to back in the day we had to be grateful for getting to work in a place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely been that shift happening.
Yes, definitely, for sure. And, you know, it's something I think that that's definitely what changed in where we are now in our career, is that we now are creating environments and working with our team and enabling them to have a voice in our kitchens too as well, and trusting people that we've been with and are working with, and you know, cook with and through them. That's what it means now to be a chef and where we are in our career. And that now, working with Michael, enable us to do more and cover more of the bases too as well.
So I remember when the day of the tattoos, you brought you brought Graham with you, who's one of the chefs, and that really struck me that you wanted him to have this experience to come and be part of this whole thing. I think he did not get a tattoo that day.
He did not.
Planned
He
accordingly.
he has several though, so he's not shy when it comes to that. But yeah, no, and Graham has moved on. I mean, he's somebody who, I thought it was going to be through a long time, but he went on to something, different in our career, and he's doing really well, and he's down in North Carolina. So,
it's both of you have had then people who worked with you go on Top Chef or Last Chance Kitchen or something. So, can you talk about using that opportunity to, you guys had such a platform on there, and then I believe one of your chefs won.
3, Kevin, Malin, and Hung.
Oh my goodness! So you are a factory of.
Yeah. We I had the opportunity to train to have all of those work with us in our kitchens and stuff like that, and they were all very successful in that competition. I don't like to say on that show, but in that competition. And I mean, a lot of people don't know, prior to that, because a lot of times Bryan and I get labeled as those guys from Top Chef. They don't know what our careers were like leading up to that moment, and that's just. That's the more interesting part. Like, I remember the day that I went to Jose Andres and I said, I want to go do this TV show. I had just opened Bazaar. We had just gotten a 4-star review from the LA Times from Irene. We had just gotten nominated for like James Beard Best New Restaurant, which Volt, ironically enough, got a nomination the same year.
Oh, wow.
And Jose looked at me and said, "You're leaving a newborn child in the middle of the street," referring to the restaurant. And that, in that moment, made me realize, if I do this, I better do a good job at it. But Bryan and I, we had a goal. We wanted to go out there, because you watch food programs like that, and no offense to the show, but now I'm talking to the show, no offense to that, but the competition wasn't there. I mean, there's always been a couple of talented chefs on that show, and everyone that are in that competition that's won, they're all talented, but there was also like 12 or 13 people there that didn't elevate the competition. And so Bryan and I, wanted to see if we could help elevate that, and not to sound like, we changed the show or anything. I don't mean that. I'm not saying that. But there were a lot of talented people on that season of that competition who went off to do great things.
But also, I think it goes without saying that two brothers would know where they're going to go on and compete in a show. I mean, yes, the contestants aren't supposed to know, who they're going to meet. In our case, it's kind of hard to hide that.
Whoa, who's that guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone thinks it was so cool. It really fucked with our relationship too.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an easy thing to go through that together.
Yeah, but when we started finding out that this was going to be a possibility, I had just opened Volt. Volt was 7 months old when I decided to leave. And so I worked my entire career in life, to get to this point where I'm opening up my own restaurant for the first time. And Michael was, right on the heels of getting ready to do that to himself. And so, like, why were we doing this? And so, it seemed cool because it was television and all of that stuff. But I think we promised each other is, like, if we're only going to do it if we each other are going to do it, because we figured, okay, well, I know how good that guy is, and he knows how good I am.
And
we're going to
Kevin,
try
too.
to help push each other but we didn't know he was coming on. Like, that's the thing. You don't know who the other people are. And then we show up and we're like, holy shit. Everybody else here
That
knows how to cook too.
That was an incredible season.
Yeah.
But then, in the first few challenges, we cooked for Joel Robuchon, we cooked for Thomas Keller, we cooked for Daniel Ballou.
No pressure.
We cooked for, how many other chefs did we cook for?
Yeah,
Anthony Bourdain, we
Right.
cooked for. Everyone came through our season, and we were put in front of these people, and we had to perform. It wasn't just the show Top Chef. This was a cooking competition with a huge audience, and part of that audience was some of the most influential chefs in the industry, and we were being judged by them.
Yeah, right now, think about it. Boku is going on right now. Well, there's a challenge that was...
We had a Boku Store challenge.
During our season.
Oh, yeah. And it's over, by the way.
Oh, yeah, we know. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I
Didn't know if you saw the winner.
Oh, yeah, no, we did. We
Okay.
did. Yeah, it was Denmark. Yeah, it was
Denmark won? I
Denmark
didn't
won.
see
Yeah. So, but the thing is, just think about that. Not only was it a competition show already, then they elevated competition by saying, okay, we're gonna cook like this intense cooking competition called a Bocuse d'Or, and we're going to have to live up to those levels for a challenge. And it was challenging. And that was the one where Joel Robuchon was there, and
Paul Bocuse's
Paul Bocuse's son was there.
Or Jerome Bocuse, sorry.
Yeah,
and I actually, this got edited
crazy.
out. I actually had a 104 fever that day, and I had to sign a waiver saying that I would go on to compete. But for some reason, I guess they didn't think that was necessary in the storyline. But I basically refused to walk off the show because they said that if I went and got medical attention, that I was automatically eliminated and disqualified from the show or from the competition. And I wasn't about, and this was towards the end of the competition. I don't care now that if this, whatever, they didn't tell the story, so I will. I had to sign a waiver saying that I would compete against their advice or whatever.
Oh my goodness. The pressure of this is, working in a kitchen, full stop. So much pressure all the time. Mm-hmm. And then this added layer of having to do it in a performative way. How did you manage the anxiety around that? Or are you people who get anxious? How do you manage the stress?
I feel like production, we probably weren't their favorites during the production of the show, of the competition. Bryan and I would do things like in the stew room, which is where they, after, you would go into this room and talk about what you had just gone through.
And we wouldn't talk.
We would tell everyone to put their heads in their laps and go to sleep, and eventually they would send all the cameramen and sound people home. And so we're all there, all 8 of us or whatever, with our heads in our laps, and then you just hear them whispering like, "They're not saying anything. What should we do?" And the producer, "Just stay there." And so they would stay there and just film us sitting there with our heads in our laps.
Story, but we're there to
But eventually they got it.
Yeah.
But then if you look at the end result, because we were there competing in a cooking competition, that was the only season that they won an Emmy. And whatever, play it up like it's because there were brothers or this or that or whatever the reason being. I think it's because they actually went out. Whoever did the casting for that season went out and casted a whole bunch of really good chefs. Mm-hmm. And that's what made the show, or the show part of it, better, because the competition was good. Mm-hmm. It was authentic. It wasn't like, I wonder who's going to win this week. It was like, I wonder who's going to win this week. The most seasons you can pick out the top 3 immediately, and the rest of them are just there to be on TV. It's like that season, season 6, they found chefs. They found a lot of really good chefs.
Oh yeah, I got deeply emotionally invested in that particular season. It was and the one where Stephanie Izard and Richard Blaze and Dale Levitsky were on too.
Who are all great chefs as well.
Really, truly fantastic.
And I think that's a good point. It's a risk to get involved in something like being on TV or cooking on television, but then you look at somebody like Emeril, who pioneered in that, back in the day, or go so far back as to Julia Child, she was on TV cooking, and she's a serious authority when it comes to food. And so for us, we were trying to break that stereotype of you have to be one or the other. What we saw was an opportunity to do more for ourselves and in our lives and make a life-changing, have a life-changing moment, because otherwise, I think food and entertainment coming together made it so that chefs can actually finally start making the money that they deserve to make for the amount of hours that they work, for the amount of bullshit they go through, for the amount of holidays that they miss, for the amount of, I remember living in New York making $300 a week and not able to pay for food and starving, starving and not only eating at the restaurants when we were going to work. That was it.
Cooking for a living and starving.
Yeah. It's such a reality, though.
Yeah,
there
it
are
is.
chefs on food stamps. There are definitely porters and dishwashers and everybody in the restaurant. That's the great irony that people don't necessarily know. You all are out there feeding people.
I think media and entertainment changed our industry and gave us something else to work harder towards. Even if it's just a carrot that's dangled and some people never reach it, I think it's motivating, and it motivates people to work harder. Not unlike a musician, but or an actor or whatever it is, or any medium for that matter. You can get there if you just put your head down and do it. And that's what we, sort of focused on.
Yeah, you have a lot of scrutiny on you because you are so well known because of that. How do you deal with the media?
We used to shy away from the scrutiny that came. We didn't want to be associated with those guys on Top Chef and blah blah blah. But the reality is that really helped our career a lot. And so if you have that type of closed-minded opinion of food and entertainment sort of colliding, then what are you doing for the industry to make it better? Because I think that it helped a lot, and it brought a lot of introverted people out and helped us to be more extroverted and create more opportunities for ourselves, therefore passing it off to the guests. And then if you look at the industry as a whole, all these small towns are now taking notice of that, and there's a restaurant scene popping up and creating more jobs and all that sort of stuff. That didn't just happen because there was this top 1% of cooking that was going on and the rest of the 99% of the country didn't know that existed or couldn't afford to get to it. Food television brought that into people's living room, therefore creating a larger demographic, therefore creating a larger need for it, therefore creating a lot more opportunity for a lot more people.
And as soon as we got off of television, we went straight back to our kitchen. That's where we went, and because we respected the opportunity that we had. It was like, okay, well, we've done this. It was successful for us. It worked really well. Let's go back and let's touch our guests. Like, let's be there for them. And
I disappeared to Pasadena and worked at the Langham Hotel. I ran a 1-star Michelin restaurant out there after Top Chef, but no one knew I was on Top Chef yet because it already filmed.
Right.
So I went out there to cook. I'm like, we had an agent now at this time because we were coming off of TV. Bryan had to go back to Volt. We went back to cook because we knew what was about to happen. We knew that, like, the way we were looking at people that were on Top Chef, and now it's like you look at everyone's accepting it more now, like the Stephanies, even the beginning, Harold. I mean, what an amazing guy,
Hell of a great chef,
and a great chef. And so, but because of this TV thing, like, people are affected in certain ways, and I think Bryan and I just wanted to help correct that because right that wrong, because it's not. So what? Yeah, we did do both. We will do both, and we'll continue to do television, and we'll continue to open restaurants, and we'll continue to show up and work the line. Like, that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And we continue to give back too. I mean, I think, after that too, we started getting really heavily involved with, like, No Kid Hungry as well. I mean, now, Michael and I, you go back to, like, the pathway of a cook and a chef, that's also changed now too. I mean, the mental health issues and all of those things evolved, and we now are starting to also think about the healthier side of where we can go with our career.
Yeah, I was going to ask about how do you take care of people who work for you? Because you've seen the bad things that happen. How do you forestall that for the people who work with you?
I think we lead by example. And now I think also we have this opportunity because we are working with them. We got involved with Chef Cycle, for example.
Those are good people.
5 o'clock in the morning, he woke me up so we could go do a cycle class, so we could get ready and train for a ride.
The past 2 days while we're in New York, we were getting up at 5 and going to do Soul Cycle, which honestly, 2-3 years ago when Bryan and I are on trips to New York, we're getting back to our hotel at, like, 6 o'clock in the morning. Like, you walk outside and it's daylight when you're leaving.
I take it you were not at Soul Cycle.
No.
But now, like, I mean, I want to live longer and change my lifestyle too.
And that's the switch that got flipped. Now, and thinking back, it wasn't that long ago. It was a lot longer ago that we were doing that, but it's fine.
For me, it was a year ago.
Okay. So,
just being honest.
But yes, having families, having, businesses, having team around you, and understanding that the wellness, that there's issues out there being, being in front of so many people. I mean, we want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves now, and we want our staff to learn from that too, as much as possible. And seeing us being involved in something like that and trying to recruit people to be a part of that is also important for us too, as well. And being examples that, hey, you can go out there, you can, have this, be in this industry and go out there and, take that after service energy and put it towards something else, which is important.
Back to your earlier point though, with, like, I want to touch base on this, the ridicule thing, or the what word did you say? Scrutiny.
Yeah.
Scrutiny. Yeah.
A lot of our restaurant reviews I feel like because we came off of television would start out, I'm not saying it was intentional or anything like that, but a lot of them would start out, I feel like, a little bit behind the mark. Like, we were getting critiqued on a different level. For instance, like, my first, Irene Verbilia, who gave me the 4 stars at Bazaar, gave us the 4 stars, I should say, Jose's team and myself, gave me my review with her at Inc. Started out with, like, Voltaggio stands in the open kitchen as the women line up to, he's like a carnival barker telling women to step right, or some shit like that, step right up or whatever. And I'm like, it wasn't true. Like, I wasn't doing that. I was actually in the kitchen, like, with my head down working, but because it was fun to be the first people to tell that story, like the obvious, that's what he's gonna do, that type of stuff was happening too. That was really hard to get through.
Yeah, 'cause I wonder if people's initial exposure to some of you was It's sort of career interrupted is Top Chef because people think like, oh, that's where they got their start, and it really, it's meeting you midstream.
We were half into this career. That was Top Chef was 10 years ago. We've both been cooking for 25 years, and we both were cooking at a certain level, at a pretty high level before we even set foot into that competition. And so, for a lot of that, that would create a lot of stuff, a lot of battles, a lot of uphill battles came because of that too. It wasn't just easy after Top Chef.
So how do you take care of yourself in those moments when it's really tough? You've had a service that maybe didn't go your way, there's something online or, whatever it happens to be. How do you stop and course correct? What's the good thing you do for yourself?
It's funny. Sorry, Brian, I don't know if
go.
Like I started saying to myself, if you can't take the heat, stay in the kitchen. And that's a lot
we
of times
both do that.
You just sort of bury yourself in your work and you try and forget about it, because if anyone gets caught up reading shit that people say about them, you can get lost and go down a rabbit hole. That's a super dark place. People have talked mad shit about us, and thank you for talking that shit, because it made us conscious of what to not be or not let them be right. Like for us, it was more about like proving that those people are wrong and focusing on what we know is right. And if we can't convince you that that's what we're doing, then I don't know what to say. But oftentimes you do read a lot of stuff about yourself because you're in the media that's just not true.
Yeah.
And honestly, that shit fucks you up. Like it's not like, haha, cool, somebody wrote something really shitty about me last night. You're just like, you have to. There's a certain psychology that comes with that it's not easy to get through. Like it sucks.
Yeah, but we also, I mean, fortunately for us, we got each other as a soundboard too. Like we can pick up the phone and scream if we need to, to each other, to kind of like get and talk through that, which is great, and that's happened and, before. And also just, again, like Michael said, I do the same, just go back to the kitchen and cook more and just be more focused on what we do and what makes us happy. Hospitality and food and our career is what, drives us, and we just stay focused on that. And yeah, there's in any industry, you're gonna see positive and negatives out there. That's what it is, and there's a lot of people who are chasing accolades. I think we just chase the instantaneous sort of gratitude or that hospitality feeling you get to make somebody else's day better. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think we go back to. Like, yeah, our day was shitty, but if I can make one of my guests' day better, then that's going to also make me feel better about what I'm doing and what I'm doing, because that instantaneous sort of gratification you get as a cook and a chef and somebody that's in this restaurant world, like, throws all that other stuff out the window.
Yeah.
It gives you a reset.
Earlier too, about the relation, Brian and I having a family. There's been plenty of times to where Brian and I can call each other literally in tears and talk to each other as brothers, but seeking professional advice. And I think that we're very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity with each other, because it would be weird if I called one of my business partners or one of my chefs bawling, trying to figure out what to do about a certain problem that I'm experiencing, and vice versa. And so for that, I definitely think that we have a pretty amazing situation with each other. And I think that us building these restaurants together and starting to focus more on utilizing our relationship to help build opportunities for each other and ultimately for our families and stuff like that, and then for the people that work with us, that's been cool. Not a lot of people get to find somebody like that, and we were born into it. So
I'm going to ask you both this because it's sort of for my own edification, because I run this online group for chefs who are really coming in with their emotional things. They want to know, if you see somebody on your team who is maybe in crisis, headed down a bad road, how do you have that conversation with them where you're concerned about their well-being and you want them to take a better path?
You just sit down and you have that hard conversation face to face. You can just do it. I think there's a responsibility involved. You look at a kitchen, it becomes your second family, and it does. And if you care about your team and your staff and everybody who's working with you, then you want to be a part of that. And yes, crisis is one thing, but also it starts with having an open dialogue, I think, early on, even like career choices. I used to have some people who come to me and they're like, yeah, I've made a decision to go on elsewhere. I wish you would have had that conversation a different way, because our experiences, with Michael and I combined even, can, help give you a lot of guidance into where you're going to go next. So that also is many other life experiences. I mean, it might not be ours, but we know somebody out there who's gone through things. And so, we've come across a lot of people in this world who've had issues. And so, I think just not being afraid,
Yeah,
to
I
sit
mean,
people down.
I think we can all agree that we've lost a lot of valuable people, in our industry, and I think the
Years been
industry's
tough.
had a lot to do with losing those people. I feel like a lot of chefs are hypocrites too, though. A lot of people that work in our industry are, because it's the hospitality industry, and so we get paid as a job to take care of people, yet we have a hard time taking care of each other. So my question is, are you doing it for a paycheck, or do you genuinely come from a place of hospitality? And like, chefs talk shit about each other constantly. Like, there's that part of it. Like, it's not like you're in the hospitality industry. Like, we're not like, there's no turf wars happening here or anything like that. Like, why talk shit about each other and then go out and try and say that you're preaching hospitality and stuff like that? And I think that there's a lot of shit talking in our industry. There's a lot of trash talking. There's a lot of, that guy took my dish, or this person did that, or whatever. It's like, who cares? Like, it doesn't, in the end, it doesn't matter. We're all going to end up in the same place.
Everybody ends up working for everybody. What is giving you the most hope about the industry right now?
Most hope.
I mean, for me, I feel like the economics definitely is something that needs to be looked at, and I think that because there are opportunities, like the one that we're working on with Conrad, I hope that there's more opportunities like that for more people, and I hope that more people, because just because a restaurant fails doesn't mean that the chef wasn't good, and I hope that people start just
Finding efforts and
recognizing cooks
yeah.
for cooks, and not necessarily just looking on how they can make somebody a brand. I think that there's a lot of really talented people out there that just really don't get to experience some of the things that Bryan and I have gotten to experience, and
You be able to surround yourself by experts in each facet of a restaurant. It's not just cooking and service and beverage. It's more than that.
I
It
like
takes
these,
an army to
these,
make it happen.
these sort of and these startups that are providing infrastructure and stuff like that. People that find a chef that is really good and help him start up his own restaurant, and so
Or her.
or her, yeah, him or her, yeah, absolutely right. Thank you for that, and help provide them with the infrastructure that they need to be successful. Because at the end of the day, like, I still remember saying I wanted to be a chef, and my father looking at me and saying, I thought you'd end up in the food service industry.
And I think hope. I mean, again too, on the other side of it. I mean, we're talking about people in crisis in this industry and all of that stuff. I still think that now there's an example of a healthy lifestyle too that's coming out of this on the other side of it. And I hope that we continue to go down that pathway, because our industry has always been known for the boozing, and all of that stuff in the late nights. And I think now it's been replaced with getting up early and going out and being healthy and going and experiencing other things than outside your kitchen. If you're just in your kitchen and you're just in that bar, you're not going to see more of what is out there that's going to help influence who you are as a cook and a chef. And in changing that lifestyle, I think there's a lot of hope for a lot of people out there, to go and do that.
I think I think the industry is really lucky to have your combined 50 years of experience. So thank you for that. And we've got 5 questions.
Okay.
And whoever wants to answer first, they're pretty, want to see where you take these. First, what's your comfort food?
Comfort food? I used to say cold pizza at one time. I've switched to grilled cheese. I have this thing for grilled cheese now, but making it at home for myself, and maybe it's because my kids also like it too, and it's fun. And I love the textures of it, and I don't know. It's a simple sandwich, and it's just.
Can I say a brand?
Sure.
I Postmates Pinkberry to my house on a regular basis.
I have
I've
such a thing for Pinkberry.
I've experienced that
The
too.
dairy-free one, the coconut one, because I can't do dairy. I love Pinkberry.
I'm not even ashamed to say it.
Yeah.
I will say I like when Michael's looking for his comfort food when I fly out to LA and I stay at his house because he orders Pinkberry. And
I accidentally ordered
so.
20 of them by accident one night because I put a 0 next to the 2, And they just showed up, and I was just like, well.
Oh, well.
Barney, what toppings do you get?
The original I get with Captain Crunch and blueberries, or the chocolate hazelnut with the milk chocolate crunch. Those are my 2 go-tos. You're welcome,
that's good.
everyone.
I do almond and pineapple on the coconut one. Good times. What is the last meal that you had that made you emotional?
It's toughy.
Yeah, it is tough.
I don't remember the name of it. I was recently actually just in Cabo, and had been drinking and partying and hanging out with my friends and stuff like that. It was New Year's, and then my girlfriend and I we wanted to get away from all that, and we took bicycles and rode into town, and we found this, I think it even said Mezcal in the name of the place, and I could look it up on my phone, but we were just so comfortable sitting there drinking Mezcal, being educated on what we were drinking, and then just eating tacos for hours. And I think it just reminded me at how fun it can be to go out, and why restaurants are so important, because it gives you an opportunity to really just escape from everything else. And vacation can be as simple as just going out to dinner. And I think oftentimes we feel like vacation has to be leaving our cities. I think that you can go to a restaurant and be on vacation. And so for me, in that moment, even if it was just an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I was on vacation because I was in Cabo and I was with my lady, but her and I just having that time together without anything else, I think that's what restaurants are for.
Yeah. And you?
Mine, I guess it's tough. I mean, I've had many great meals. I'd say one time I got to travel together. I mean, mine was traveling too. We went to Puerto Rico, and my wife and I renewed our vows after 10 years, and we had this. Jose Andres was at Mi Casa in Puerto Rico at the Ritz-Carlton in Dorado Beach, and they went well over and above any expectation I ever had. After we had that ceremony, and my son actually, read the vows, and it was an amazing experience. We had this really simply catered meal in our room, and their staff was so attentive, and everybody was like, and they did these special things for my kids, and it was just like this family meal that we had together that was around such a special thing that was just the 5 of us. And it was the most amazing experience I think I've had with my family, other than him, with food. And so that's one that kind of sticks in my head, and it was kind of like over the top, It was like just the attention to detail and the luxury and everything that went into it. Just like it made it emotional, I think, because they spared no expense. I mean, it was
That's what's so cool about what we do, though, is we actually have the power or the opportunity to get to provide that for other people too. And like, there's just something cool about the fact that people celebrate their engagements with us. They have their engagements with us. They chefs a lot of times are, we're looked at as just cooks, but we're doctors. I mean, we're we have to deal with people's food allergies. In some cases, you have people's lives in your hands. We're psychologists, we're accountants, we're all this different. Yeah. And everyone says, "Oh, I got so many different things I got to do for my staff, for my restaurant." There's a lot that we do for the guests too. Down to a couple came into Ink one night, and I'll never forget this. It was raining, and they weren't happy, and they got up and left the restaurant. And I saw this from the past, and I chased them outside into the rain as they were getting into their minivan, and I saw a car seat in the back. I'm like, "Oh, I noticed a car seat. Are you guys?" They're like, "We're parents. We're school teachers. We've been saving up all year to come eat here." And when we got here, we felt like we weren't as important as all the like celebrities or fancy people that were eating in the restaurant. I'm like, "Come inside and like have dinner for free." And then they kept saving up their money and coming back and eating in the restaurant. And like, if that type of stuff like doesn't warm your heart, it's like, why are you doing this?
And you're in the wrong business if it
Yeah.
doesn't. Oh my gosh. What is the last meal that someone cooked for you in their home? I know people are scared to cook for chefs. So what's the last time somebody cooked for you?
Well, I personally, my parents, my mother moved to, our parents moved to our parents
She's mine too.
moved to Maryland, and they now live with me on my property, where they have like a little bungalow sort of house there, and I get to have mom food again, so that's kind of fun. It's really cool. And there's dishes that she did when we were growing up. And Michael comes home. Obviously Maryland's be spending a lot more time now, so he's going to also be able to get to experience more of that soon too. It's been a long time, but I have to say, around Christmas there's this lasagna that our stepfather makes. It's amazing. It takes him like 4 days to prepare it, and it's like huge. And so he did it this year for New Year's Day, and It'd been a while. It'd been like 5 years since I've had it. And it was just like, I mean, he took me back 5 years, like in a moment with that first bite. It was so cool.
It's lovely. Like that ratatouille moment.
Yeah, it was
I mean,
great.
really, it's anything that mom makes. So she's right there. They're not. She's just an amazing person. And like when I do go back to visit Bryan, and now I'm going back to visit my mom. He's got like the farm situation. I'm like the visitor. I'm like the crazy Uncle Mike from California to his kids.
Yeah, he gets shot with like Nerf guns.
But even last time I was there, Mom made a breakfast casserole that she just kind of put out on the counter, and it was effortless and natural, and it was fun. And
But it's special because it's Mom.
Can she adopt me? Happily be your sister. What living musician would you want to cook for, and what would you make for them?
Go for it.
No, I'll let you answer that.
I mean, I cook for a lot of living musicians.
Yeah, exactly. He does already.
But
yeah.
who's the one who you have? Who's like your grail?
I don't know. It's tough. I think I
grew up listening to Pearl Jam a lot, so I think I'd like to cook for Eddie Vedder.
What would you make him?
I'm not sure because I don't know what he likes. I don't know what his diet is, but I mean that's the thing though too. I think it would be more of like one of those things that you want to listen to what your guests needs and wants are, and help create that experience for them. I mean I think it's true for anybody. I mean I don't think I would ever dictate a menu if I had the opportunity to cook for somebody that I really wanted to cook for.
Yeah.
I just can't answer it. I like too many different types of music to zero in
Yeah,
on
it's a
one.
thing too.
It's
it's
a tough
hard.
question
Yeah.
for everybody I've asked it of thus far. It's taken a sec for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had everyone from like Jay-Z and Beyonce together in the restaurant to the list goes on and on. Like, and I can talk about it now because it's years and years and years ago. I never would say anything about something that people didn't know about. But the fact that like last year I got to set a Guinness Book of World Records with Snoop Dogg at Bottle Rock. So we, him, myself, and Warren G were on stage together up in Napa Valley at Bottle Rock, which is a music and food festival. And like William Sonoma called and the festival called. They're like, "What do you want to do this year?" I'm like, "What if we set a Guinness Book of World Records?" And they were like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And I'm like, "Well, Snoop Dogg's in the lineup. Can we make that happen?" And his people were super cool about it. Warren G's people were super cool about it. And last year I got to stand. But then like the year before that, Bryan and I jumped around on grapes with Everlast behind us and did a demo with grape juice. Year before that, I got to fried chicken with Flavor Flav. Like, food and music together, like, for me, we need to do more of that. And I think a lot of these music festivals, and not to get off topic too much, but kids are wanting and doing less drugs and less alcohol, and there's more expectation for an experience. And so I think food's very much being a part of that. And I think in a lot of cases creating healthier experiences for people as opposed to like putting on a bunch of EDM music, turning the lights in crazy colors and hoping everyone drops a bunch of drugs.
Yeah. Last question. You have 5 uninterrupted minutes for self-care. What do you do with those 5 minutes? You're maybe in the walk-in, you're maybe somewhere, but nobody's going to bug you for 5 minutes.
5 minutes. At work? Or anywhere?
Anywhere.
I don't ride my bike. But I need more than 5 minutes for that. I don't know, put my phone down. I could put my phone down for 5 minutes for sure.
Yeah, just turn it all off. Not just put your phone down, but just the same way you push that off button on your phone, just close your eyes and not think about anything, because we're constantly like, what about this? What about the restaurant? What about the family? What about it's just nonstop. Sometimes it's nice to just like bury your face in a pillow and just hold it and just chill.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for coming on here. Appreciate your time. And I know you have to fly out. Good luck getting through the storm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.